This is the S2000 Solar Generator by AllPowers. It comes with a 2000 watt Pure Sine Inverter with a surge capacity of 4000 watts. It has a 1500 watt hour lithium ion battery, has 4 AC out. On the DC side of things, it has a 13 volt regulated cigarette adapter, 2 USB-C outs, and 4 USB-A outs. It accepts 400 watts of AC charging or 500 watts of solar panel charging through the MPPT controller. But is it worth the money they're charging? Let's find out. Good evening and welcome back to Cruising Off Duty. I am Craig. We're going to continue our series where we review products that help you live off the grid longer and more comfortably. Today we're going to be talking about the AllPowers S2000. It's a solar generator, and if you've watched my channels before, you've known I've reviewed small little solar generators, much larger solar generators, and this one sort of fits in the middle. I'm going to talk about the pros, I'm going to talk about the cons, I'm going to talk about which type of customer would go for something like this versus something smaller versus something larger, talk about some use cases, and then I'll summarize by my pros and cons and tell you whether I think this AllPowers S2000 Solar Generator is worth the money, or whether you should spend a little more to get more or a little less to get less. So it is very user specific. There are certain use cases I can see right away for this that would make it a no-brainer to get if you only need those functions, but there's certain areas that I think it's lacking, and those will be in my cons part and might push you towards something with a few more bells and whistles, a little bit more refinement, so to speak. So I just want to say off the top, this was a model sent to me by AllPowers to review. They said nothing to me about what I need to say. This is not a sponsored ad in any way. And actually, when you finish watching the video, you'll see I mentioned a number of cons that will definitely indicate to you that I am not being paid by AllPowers in any way. I think it's more important that my viewers feel my reviews are completely unbiased, and you'll know that from every product I've reviewed so far. I've always had the pros and the cons, and in the cons I pull no punches. Even products I absolutely adore, like my Bluetti AC200 Max here, I love it. But you see that big power cord over there on the side? That takes up way too much space, and that was one of my cons, and there was a couple other little cons as well. So let's get on to the AllPowers Solar Generator. So it's in the same family of solar generators, and in case you haven't watched those other episodes, a solar generator is generally kind of a multi-purpose way of taking in power, converting it into proper DC power, and then having an inverter built in, a sine wave inverter, to change that DC power into AC so you can use it for your everyday appliances. So the S2000, what exactly is it? We'll talk about its specs. It is definitely lighter. I'll put the specs of how much it weighs on the screen, but as you can see, very easy to pick up, much easier to pick up than the larger sort of Bluetti AC200 Max, but obviously not quite as light as something like this. But of course, something like this doesn't have as much inverter or battery power as something like this. But just so you know, it's solidly built. It has these kind of metal handles. It really does feel like a normal car battery. It looks like a battery. It's very minimalist in its design, very boxy. It's not much to it. Like the stuff on the front is where you access everything, and there's really nothing on the side except for sort of fans are on the side to cool it down, and on the back is the plug. And that's it. And that is one of the things I'll mention pro right off the con. It doesn't come with a separate charging brick. It just comes with a normal cord that you would use to plug in your computer, or even TV sets have a lot of times this kind of plug on the back. So you plug it into your wall, plug it into that, boom, done. If you don't think you're going to need to charge it, if you're only out for the day or evening, weekend, you don't think you'll need to charge it, you can leave that at home, but it's not really saving you a lot. That was one of my cons of the Bluetti, was it comes with this honkin' big charging brick that you have to pack as well. And the downside to that was too, when that charging brick is plugged in, whether it's charging the Bluetti or not, there's constantly a fan running, which I was not a fan of, no pun intended. This thing obviously doesn't make any noise when you plug it in. And one thing I will say about the AC2000, when it is fully charged, it is silent. It doesn't keep having a fan noise when it doesn't need to be charged. That was a bugaboo of mine of the Bluetti. So I'll just say that up front. The AC200 definitely beats the Bluetti in quietness. When it doesn't need to have a fan running, it's not running. So that's good. It comes with a 2000 watt sine inverter. And a lot of reviewers just give you the specs and then say if there's good bang for the buck. Very little testing is done. So I went through a bunch of tests just to make sure that the claimed statistics were actually met. Because there's nothing worse than just going, yeah, it has 100 watt out. I will say that. 100 watt out on the USB-C, and then nobody tests it. Was it actually 100 watt out? So let's go through it. 2000 watt sine inverter, very clean sine wave. I'll throw a picture of that on the screen. Very impressed with the noise freeness of the sine inverter. 2000 watts, that's where it gets the S2000 name. Only 1500 watts though in battery. And let's talk about the battery. This little one, this one are lithium ion. This is lithium iron phosphate. With a lithium iron phosphate, you can get like 3,500 cycles, and that is from completely dead to completely full is considered one cycle. So if you only bring it down a little bit and then back to full, that's not a cycle. That's just a portion of a cycle. 3,500 cycles before your capacity goes from 100% down to 80%. This one has a stated capacity or cycles of 2,500, which I question because it's lithium ion, not lithium iron phosphate. I've never seen a lithium ion claim 2,500 cycles. So be forewarned, there's no way for me to test that without running this thing completely dead and up 2,000 times, and that would take me years. So I'm just giving you a caveat that maybe that's exaggerating a bit. But even if it's 1,500 or even 2,000 full cycles from empty to full, that is a lot. A lot. I mean, you'd have to drain this thing every day for years and charge it fully for years before that would bring you down to 80% of its capacity. Again, I'm not saying that that number isn't right. I'm just saying there's no way for me to test that. So the things I did test is, can the sine wave inverter actually handle 2,000 watts? And yes, it can. It can handle 22-ish to almost 2,300 watts nonstop for quite a period of time. After 5 minutes, it passes the test. Above 23-ish up to 2,400 watts, when you push it, it will overload the system and it'll go beep and your AC will turn off. Okay, so we've got this heater, which is 1,200 watts, and this heat gun, which is 1,200 watts. When they're on their own, they're 1,200 watts in real. The AllPowers might say slightly lower because its voltage lags a bit. But we're proving this is a 2,000 watt inverter, and we're, according to the AllPowers, we're doing over 2,200 watts, and we've been going for about a minute. We'll just go a little longer and see if it ever just powers off, because we're above its rated specs. And again, heater on full, heat gun on full. We were going to add this other one just to see. Maybe we should just to see. This is about 300 watts. It's running. Oh, no. We got to 2450 and it powered off. So 2,200 you can consistently go for a while. Above that, yeah, probably not. Oh, and I should tell you that. Let's go through the front here. So this little button here, I'll zoom in on it. This little button is your Bluetooth connection, or IoT they call it. That is just so you can connect it to the app, which I'll talk about in a second. The next one is AC on and off, and the next one is DC on and off. And I gotta say right off the get-go, the DC there. The DC button is super funky and a little bit delayed. Even on the app, you will turn on DC or turn off DC and nothing happens. It still says it's on when you've hit it to go off. And you think, do I need to, what? And you hit it again. And then it's like it's delayed 5-10 seconds. I don't know why the DC is like that. It is. I found the buttons in general were kind of, for one thing, when they're off, that just turns off the screen. That doesn't turn off the AC. You have to press, again, there, press and hold for the AC to go off, and then the light stays on. See, you have to do this funky thing where you press and hold it. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you press and hold it, and it works right away. And sometimes, there, I turned it back on. Sometimes you press and hold it, and it doesn't work right away. And you're like, what? What did I do wrong this time? So it seems like hitting the button for the first time just wakes up the screen. So AC, DC, or Bluetooth button. Touching it just turns the screen on. And then touching it a second time and holding it for a bit turns it on or turns it off, with the caveat that the DC seems to be fickle. Whether the second press and hold actually turns it off or on is kind of random. The other thing that is weird is even when you have the DC off, as soon as you plug in something DC, it just comes on. I've used my voltmeter on all the DC plugs, and there's always power coming out of them. It's always engaged. And you'd think, well, maybe it's because it's a battery. So of course DC is always turned on even if this is off. And when you plug something in, let me plug in my laptop. Okay, so this is my MacBook Pro. It's supposed to take 100 watts. I'll put it in here. You notice the DC light is not on. Put it in. You hear that says it's charging. DC turns itself on, and then it tells you how many watts. Now you'll notice 61 watts, not 100 watts. This thing accepts 100 watts. I have a 100 watt brick that I can run a watt meter on it, and it will do 100 watts. This thing does not do 100 watts. It does 60 watts, 61 watts. So its claim on the specs is that you have 110, 120 volt AC. Then you have two 100 watt USB-C. My studies on everything I've ever tried to test it with says 60 watts. Then it's supposed to have two quick charging USB-A. Sorry, no. They are all 5 watt out. I've tried it on multiple things. I'll do some screen grabs of testing I did. Okay, the USB-C to my MacBook Pro, which is supposed to be 100 watt charging capacity, is getting about 60 watts. So even though I heard these are 100 watt out USB-C, I'm only getting 60. So that might be the max capacity. I don't have anything else that charges by USB-C above 60 watts. Plugging in the USB-A to USB-C, and I'm getting 4 watts. Let's try the lower one. 4 watts. And you heard the bing from my laptop. It is charging 4 watts. Doesn't seem to matter which one I put these in. It's 4 watts. So these appear to be just regular old USB-A. I don't think any of them are quick chargers. And I believe these are 60 watt out only. All 4 of these are 5 watts. So there's no fast charging USB-A. Now, this model is the S2000. There's an S2000 Pro where this circle here is not just a sticker. It's actually a 30 amp RV amp. And I know the inverter is a little bit bigger in that one. Instead of 2000, I think it's 2200. And it has the 30 amp out. Maybe that's the problem, is they're saying this is a 100 watt out USB-C, but not on this model, even though on their website it says it's 100 watts. It's actually 60 watts. And these are not quick charge, they're actually 5 watt. Again, these are definitely in the con category because they're not matching the specs, but if you don't need more than 60 watts, let's face it, most things, your iPad's only a 30 watt charger, most laptops are 60 watt. This can clearly be charged at 60 watts, it just takes longer. So it's not like it doesn't work, it just doesn't work up to claim specifications. This is a 12 volt regulated, so it's supposed to maintain the voltage. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. So that's about it. This XT60 is where you bring in your solar panel. And let me just show you. So you only get really 2 cords with this. You get your charging cord, and then you get a MC4 connector type of cord for your solar panels. So on one side you've got a XT60, and on this side you've got an MC4 for your solar panels. So there you go. That's what you get with it. Not really a lot to the cords, and what's pretty much the no frills version of this. Again, I'll throw a picture of the website on there. There is an S2000 Pro, which has higher specs in the inverter and a 30 amp out. I would have loved to test that. I reached out to AllPowers after they sent me this saying, I'm a boater. I would love to test something that has shore power. That is the reason I bought the Blue Eddy, was because it had 30 amp shore power, and when I tested it, it more than does 30 amps out of this, and that's great. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to test if this has 30 amp because it doesn't have a 30 amp plug. So there we go. So those are what you get on the front. 1500 watt hour lithium battery. I tested it. It tests all the way to dead, where the battery management system will shut off at about 80% of that, which is pretty standard in the industry, 80%. So it's not really blowing me away on the upside. It's also not disappointing me on the downside. So You don't get the full 1500 watt because the battery management system doesn't want the battery to get all the way to 0. Another thing I noticed is that it will say it's 100 watts or 100% when you're charging it, and it keeps charging for a while. I noticed another reviewer mentioned this as well. It gets up to 99% really quickly and then just keeps charging, and it gets to 100% and it still shows watts coming in from the charger, and then it's like 100% already, but it still charges for quite a long period of time after it's at 100%. The same thing happens on the way down. It'll say 100%, and I was doing a load test on this, and I had a small heat gun running, about a 250 or 300 watt heat gun, and it was running for a while, and it still said it was 100% full. No. A heat gun taking 300 watts out should not keep it up. As soon as you start using that for any period of time, it should go to 99, 98, 97. It stayed at 100 for minutes. So if I did a little recording of that too, I might throw it on the screen. But okay, talking about the battery calibration, just to show you, I've been going for almost 25 minutes now of 250 watts running this heat gun, and it still says it's 100%. So I don't think that could be right. Another thing I noticed when I do the volts on my wall plug, my AC, it's 119 point something volts, 120. That's kind of common, even though people often say 110 is American standard and 220 is European standard. 120 is really what your wall plug is giving out, so more than the rated amount. The Blue Eddy, 120 all the time. Even when you put a heavy load on it, like a 1500 watt heat gun, you put your voltmeter in the other ACs to see how much the volts go down from 120. It went down to like 119.2 or 3, barely dips. This, even when there's no load on it, shows 114-ish watts or volts. And when you put a load on it, it drops to 112. Okay, so now we have it plugged into the AllPowers. It doesn't start at 120. And just so you notice, it's at 99% full. So it's not because the battery's low. It stays at a consistent 114.7 volts. So it's lower just to start. Now we're going to plug in the heat gun. All right, so 114.7 still. Now we're going to turn on the heat gun. Goes down to 112.5. And on the Blue Eddy, it was 1200 watts. And now it's only saying it's 1028 watts for the same heat gun on the same setting. So that's why sometimes when I had a heat gun and I plugged it into the Blue Eddy or into my, my wall-mounted watts and voltmeter, it would say heat gun is 1500 watts for argument's sake. And then when I plugged it into here, it would only be 1350 watts. And you're like, why is it less watts? It's because watts are really volts times amps. And since the volts out of this are starting at 114 and going down to 112, it's that number times amps equals the total watts. Since this is at 120 and this is at 114, it runs things at slightly less watts. So things like toasters, kettles, heat guns, anything like that, they can accept a slightly lower voltage and still run. It just means you're using less power or less watts, so the heat gun wouldn't be quite as hot. You know what I'm saying? You won't know because heat guns are damn hot. But that's just something to keep in mind. The volts are above 110, but they're not all the way up to 120. So that's the testing on that. Okay, so getting back to the front screen, it's not touch sensitive. The Blue Eddy over here is touch sensitive. So you can actually go in the menu on there or use the app. There is an app for the AllPowers as well. It is just extremely basic, like extremely basic. All it really shows you is what percentage is the battery at, and then how many watts are coming in or out. That's it. And you can turn on and off the same things that are on this button. So let's just see the delay on the DC. Well, DC's off now. Let's go DC on. Okay, it came on. Sometimes there's a delay. Maybe it's when there's something plugged in, there's a delay. But yeah, there's nothing you can touch on here to get more information about usage or yeah, it would be nice to have usage bars, how much DC have you used, or how many amps is it using. It just has an overall how many watts are going in or out of this. Yeah, so it's there. I could see using it if I'm in my boat and this is in the salon area and I'm in my bedroom and I'm like, oh geez, did I turn the AC off on this because maybe I don't want to run it down? I could look on my app in my bed and go, oh no, it's still on. Let me turn it off. Let me do that now. There, just turned it off. There, it's off on this thing. So it is useful for turning on and off things, but don't expect to touch things and get a lot more detail about what's going on within the battery. There's no like, what's the heat of the battery, what's the this, that, the other thing. There's no stats at all. Now this is a hardware or software thing. AllPowers could easily upgrade this app. I'm assuming there's more information they could post, but it is what it is. So now let's talk about who would buy this. It's somebody who wants to take something camping. Now I've always said in the past, something like this is a 500 watt solar generator. It has only 100 watt of solar panel in, so you have to have a very small solar panel, like there's one behind here from AimTom that's 100 watt, and that's what I use for something like this. This accepts a 500 watts, I believe, of solar. So you could plug in, they sent me this AllPowers, which I'm going to do in the next video, a 200 watt, or if you plug two identical ones, you can put 400 watts into this, no problem. And again, you would do it into the XT60 input here, and you charge up your battery. So that's what you would do. You take it camping. It's not going to run your RV or your boat with AC or with a shore power cord, which is a shame. Again, they do have a model that does that. You will have 4 AC out, and the total capacity is about 2200 watts, even though it says 2000. I've tested it and other reviewers have tested it. You can probably get up to 2200. Plus it does say there's a 4000 watt surge ability. How do you really test that? Because I guess we're talking like a less than a second. If you turn on something with a motor, like a table saw or something, that first second that the motor is getting started, there's a serious wattage jump. Even on a fridge, you'll notice it. When it's humming along, you'll notice it's taking 80 watts. But when that compressor first kicks on, you'll see, even on a smaller fridge, it might jump up like to 1000 watts and then come back down to 80. So surge protection is great, supposedly 4000 watts. Very hard to test that because you'd have to be watching your screen as you plug in 6 things at once or something to try and get that 4000. It's very hard to do. 4000 watts of peak, 22,000 officially of sine wave inverter, but it's been proven can do about 2200. I don't know if you could go for hours at 2200. It might overheat. The fans would be going full blast, and at some point maybe there'd be a heat sensor that would shut it off. But for short blasts of time, you can turn on a space heater and a heat gun, which I've already done, and get to 2200 watts and just sort of leave it there. So there you go. So this is sort of more of a camping, I would say, maybe a boater or RVer that's not going to use this as their everyday power source, because 1500 watts of lithium just isn't enough to run a camper or a boat for very long. And unlike the Bluetti, there's no expansion battery capacity. You cannot, as you see, there's nothing on the sides of this to plug in another battery. So you're stuck with just the 1500 watts. I honestly think if you're going to call it the S2000, it should have been a 2000 watt sine inverter and a 2000 watt hour lithium battery. Then it makes sense. But it's a 1500 watt lithium battery, which is a little on the small side. But comparing it to this is a 500 watt sine inverter and a 548 watt lithium. So this is 3 times as big. So if that's just not going to cut it for you, this is perfect for you. Now, if you want more bells and whistles, a better app, touch sensitive screen, more outputs, a lithium iron phosphate battery, then you're going to want to go with something like this. And that is where I'd say, is this something I would buy? Not at the price it's at right now. Sorry, AllPowers. I'd love to say you gave me a good product to review in terms of its bang for the buck, but it's just not cutting it. Right now, when I first got this product, it was on sale for $14.99 US. And I thought, $14.99, this is on sale for $18.99, just the top part, not the extra battery. $18.99, I'm like, 400 bucks? For me, I'd still get this, but 400 bucks is right on the border where if somebody had a budget and they say, I can't go above, $1,500. That's all I can afford. And you don't need 30 amp out, and you don't need touch sensitive screens and a more sophisticated product. Then this is fine. This will do you fine. But now I just checked as I'm filming this, and it's on sale for $16.99. 1,700 bucks. This is $18.99. 1,900 bucks. For $200 more, you get this. I'm sorry, AllPowers. I'd love to say this is good bang for the buck, but you need to cut this price down. The S2000 Pro with the 30 amp out should be $14.99. This should be $1,200 maybe, not $1,699. So unfortunately, it doesn't get my seal of approval of good bang for the buck. if you can catch it on sale. I will put the links down below. AllPowers said they would give me some discount code to give to you, that you can get a discount over the price that you see on their website. If they do I sent them an email saying you never gave me the code, so I can't really present it here on camera. But if I do get one, I'll put it in the video description below. If you have one of these and you've had it for a while and you've tested how it handles a long time, because I've only had this thing for about 2 weeks now, and I have tested a lot, but I mean 2 weeks isn't really that long. If you have one of these or the Pro model, let me know in the comments what you think of it longer term. I'm curious how this holds up. Do you think this is going to hold up to 2,500 cycles with a lithium ion battery? I doubt it, but you never know. Maybe they've got some primo cells in this thing, but yeah, there you go. If it's all you need and you can get it for a good price, if you only need 2,000 watts of sine wave inverter, and you don't need a massive battery, in other words, you only use it sporadically. Let's say when you're camping, you might plug in a kettle or a toaster and use it just for a little while, but don't plan to run heavy loads like that on it for a long period of time. This is perfect. Light enough to throw in your car for camping trips, light enough to carry from your car, wherever you got to park, to the campsite without blowing out your back. This might be perfect for you if you can get it on sale for $1,400 or less. Then sure. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Again, I honestly want to put pros and cons of every product. So if you are a manufacturer of an off-grid product you think I should review, send it to me. Just be forewarned, if you send me garbage, I'm going to say it's garbage. Not that I'm saying this is garbage, I'm just saying it's a little bit too expensive for what you're getting. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If so, show the channel some love by giving it a thumbs up. It helps grow the channel and allows me to review more products. If more people are watching it, then more manufacturers will send me products to review, which is you helping me to help you. So there you go. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Until next time, this is Craig signing off, wishing you safe cruising.